connected with us, click that QR code. We'd love to connect a little bit more with you. Couple big, huge, enormous things going on. Friday night, really big deal right here. We're having a holiday fair for exactly 1 hour. It's going to be so much fun. I hope that you will invite someone because we've got amazing things going on, including the bounce house, snow machine, free Mr. Softee, photo booth, hot cocoa bar, cookie decorating. We're trying to find a Santa Claus, otherwise the photo booth will be with me. And that will be real awkward for all the wonderful little kids coming to the neighborhood, but we are really excited about this. We've sent out a ton of mailers. One of the things we want to do as a church is just give a gift to the world of like a free, amazing, family-friendly, fun time. So put some of these on your chair. We got a few more. Find someone to invite. Should be fun. We're still looking for 1 or 2 people to help pull this thing off. We really need someone to help me assemble a balloon arch for that photo booth. So if you're like willing to suffer for 1 hour, please come help me. Let me know, and we'll do it together. It'll be fun. Then the following Sunday, we will not be meeting in this room, Sunday the 22nd. Instead, we'll be having what we call a Vision and Fundraiser event. This time it's a brunch, and I promise you delicious scones. What those Vision and Fundraiser events really are is a way of creating a discussion about really the future of church, not just Dwell Church. What is the church of the future going to look and feel like? They've been really hope-inducing conversations. So in our email tomorrow, there'll be a registration. But if you've never participated in one of those Vision and Fundraisers, it's really the best place to get all the inside information about Dwell. Ask a lot of questions. There's some extended Q&A time there. It's a really good way to get into the guts of Dwell Church. Even if you aren't yet ready to give, it's great. So register that through the email tomorrow. And now, my friends, we've been talking about the shape of joy. Here's the story. You are beloved, but you are small. And this is the story that Jesus is teaching us to live during the Christmas season. You are beloved, but you are small. You see, each human has to choose which story will they live. And last week we were looking at the default story offered to us, where we prioritize our own achievements above all else. And what we've learned, what sociologists tell us, is that we live in the most isolated time in human history. That we are starved for deep connection with each other because we've been living this story of achievement-oriented individuals off on their own adventure. And we tell ourselves someday when we've achieved enough, maybe then we'll have time to invest in something like a church. But we were looking at some research cited by Slate. Even the secular outlets are starting to say it is untenable to live this story of isolation. As an alternative to that, especially at Christmas, Jesus offers to you and I a chance to live in a different way. So we'll be talking about that smallness. What does it mean to live the story of smallness? What does it mean to embrace smallness? But especially we will be talking about joy. You see, joy is sort of the heritage, the birthright of a follower of Jesus. When the angels come to the shepherds to announce the birth of Jesus, they say, "Do not be afraid, because we have good news of great joy for all people." All people are offered this joy. So the question we'll be asking today is, how do you live in to that joy? How do you embrace the joy that Jesus has for you? And at the end, I hope to offer you a simple little prayer that is quite life-changing, I think. That I want to make the case will help you to step into the joy that Jesus has for you. So we're talking about how do we live into that joy, but I really want to start with a more urgent question for us. And that more urgent question is the joy that Jesus offers us durable enough to help us in our actual lives? See, this year at Dwell, some people have faced really painfully difficult things. Far more painful and difficult than I have. And we're only a 10-month-old church plant. So as we have journeyed just a little bit of time together, already some incredibly painful things have happened in our community. And so as we face the very real and inevitable suffering that humans have as part of being a human being, we have to ask this question: is the joy that Jesus promises us actually durable enough to help us? Does it really help us in our life? Does it pass the life test? A couple of years ago, I was counseling a much older, wiser person than me, and she was talking about a deeply complicated emotional state that she found herself in. She was experiencing, on the one hand, deep heartbreak. She was unwillingly estranged from her youngest son. And in those situations, there's always two sides. Of course, that's really complicated. But I trusted her when she said that this was an unwilling situation, that she had done everything she possibly could to not be estranged with her youngest son. And at the same time, she was deeply gladdened, deeply joyful to have held her first grandbaby. And so wisely, she once told me, you know, it's as if the pain faucet is all the way on. Being estranged from my son is as painful of a situation as I could possibly imagine. And at the same time, it's as if the joy faucet is all the way on. Because holding this first grandchild was the most remarkable thing that's ever happened to me. And somehow it was just both. Both the pain and the sorrow were on, full bore. And this person was onto something, because some psychologists at least suggest we wrongly conceive of joy and sorrow as polar opposites, as if they exist on a spectrum where I'm either on the sorrow end for a while or I'm either on the joy end. Instead, they suggest they are their own individual spectrum, so that you could be all the way up on misery, and yet you could also come to be the kind of person that can be all the way up on joy. Yeah, your misery faucet might be all the way on, but you can learn to live in to the kind of joy that can also be all the way on, full bore in your life. One way this sermon goes is that we could explore how some psychologists suggest that you actually can't have joy without sorrow, because it would make no sense. It would be a default mode, a blank sheet of paper, if your life was only ever joyful. And they also suggest you only have sorrow because you were once joyful. They always exist together. But for now, let us accept that there are two spectrums that you exist upon. More or less miserable, and more or less joyful. And so instead of the question being, is joy that Jesus offers me durable enough to see me through a miserable season, the question becomes, if I'm in a miserable season, why would I not also become the kind of person who can bring the joy fully online? And so today I want to discuss with you how we might bring the joy fully online. We've been thinking about a book here by a psychologist named Richard Beck. He's a Christian psychologist out of Evelyn University in Texas. He wrote the book, Shape of Joy. We stole his title. He doesn't know who we are. We're not going to do that. It's fine. Here he's suggesting he's following the research around joy from secular institutions all over the world. And the trajectory, the thesis of this book is that if you follow the research around joy, it necessitates something like Jesus to make it possible. That even the best and secular research of our day around happiness and joy say you need something like the Christian faith to make it all come together. And so he maps out 6 elements of what it means to be a human being, 6 components of your inward self that he talks about. This is what he says research might say. You have a self, it looks like this. You have a volume to yourself. How loud are your internal thoughts? And he says a thriving, joyful person will have quiet internal thoughts. A troubled person will have deafening internal thoughts. Maybe you've had that before, like the voice inside is just so loud, right? A healthy, joyful person will have a quiet interior dialogue going with themselves. For the focus of the interior person, where will it be? It'll be on the other person, it'll be on others, your other focus. Of course, we all have experienced seasons or have to work with somebody who is not other focused. Not that fun. Where do we invest our emotional energy? Now, there is a type of person that is deeply focused on the other person and still investing their emotional energy into themselves. You can be other focused in a way that still circles back around to be focused on you. And so they have this great word, hypoegoic. I just wanted to share it with you. It's like a little fun to say, one of those words, no one knows what it means. It means you're investing your emotional resources outside yourself. The other term they use for this is self-forgetfulness. This is a humble person. Not thinking less of yourself, thinking of yourself less often. All of these things map directly to joy. If you're building this in your interior person, you're on the road to joyfulness. If you're able to forget yourself in the moment and focus on the other people around you, you are going to be on the way to becoming a joyful person. Another core facet of being a human, of having an interior self, is the stability. Are you reactive to everything that happens? Can some small things throw your day off? Yes, all the time. That happens to me all the time. I read this book and I thought, I should be more stable. But a core thing that maps to joy is that interior stability. When bad things happen to you, when good things happen to you, can you kind of keep things flowing in a stable, non-reactive way? Valuation. How do you value yourself? Here's where the wheels tend to fall off as we make the argument of a material, exclusively material world. Where do you find a deep interior sense that you are unconditionally valued? And gosh, we're so lucky that is just a core thing of following Jesus. That if I wanted to, I could talk to someone every day that says you are unconditionally valued. But if you are experiencing your value as unconditional, you are on the road to joyfulness. And here we come to the story that we're trying to explore together. Because you also have an interior size. How do you experience the size, the volume, the grandeur of your interior person? And the research suggests that if you experience your interior person as healthy but small, you are on the way to joy. Now, of course, we have all been made to feel small in a negative way. Sometimes someone has made you feel unintelligent or unimportant. And that's not the kind of small that we're talking about. Dr. Beck describes it this way. Here's the kind of small you and I are learning from Jesus here at Christmas time. It's that kind of small. Right there. The small self is a felt sense of unity and oneness within a larger whole. We see ourselves as a piece of a much larger puzzle. And as we find our vital and proper place in the world, we come to recognize and honor the webs of reciprocity and mutuality and dependency that connect us to each other and to the natural world. With a smaller sense of self, I also face my limitations and finitude, adopting healthier perspectives about what I can and cannot realistically expect of myself. I also refuse to stand pridefully isolated, autonomous, and independent and alone, cutting myself off from the world and for others. I embrace my dependency, and I embrace my smallness. I admit that I need you. I also come to recognize the urgent moral demands placed on me by reality, with the natural world and fellow human beings, and how they require recognition, respect, and care. For all things we come to see stand or fall together. All things share a common life and fate. In triggering this experience of a smaller, more connected, more relational self, research has shown how this awe of being a small unit in a greater whole creates feelings of love and compassion, pulling us out of ourselves and into relationship with the world. It draws us closer together when we embrace our smallness. See, the story that Jesus is teaching us is to embrace that we are beloved, but very small. And what does the small person do? They say, I need someone to care for me. To change the metaphor some, we embrace, I am but one sheep in a greater flock. I am but one sheep in need of a shepherd. And this is, my friends, the great good news. Oh, that Jesus promised to be a good shepherd for us. And here, my friends, is where I want to offer you a simple prayer. You can pray to daily embrace your smallness. See, how do we have joy? It's by embracing this story of us being beloved but small. But how do we do that? It's by praying a real simple prayer. There was a man named Frank Laubach who I loved to study. This dude was amazing. He was a missionary to the Philippines, and he started in 1915. He wrote this book, Letters by a Modern Mystic. And he'd been working in the Philippines for over 20 years, And when he was 56, he had this great spiritual awakening. See, he'd been working, laboring as a missionary for decades. But a certain spiritual practice, a certain way of praying, opened up his life. He recognized from the people around him that he was ministering to, they had this really sort of rigid view of their God. And they were obsessed with figuring out this God's will and surrendering to it no matter what. And he would say it to himself, I think it would be difficult to surrender to that God. But I love Jesus. What would it be like if I simply surrendered to him? And so at 56, he went on a mission. He set himself a goal where he said, once an hour, I will say, Jesus, I surrender to you. And then he found out that he loved him. And so then, once every 30 minutes of his waking day, he would say, Jesus, what is your will for me? And whatever came to being through that prayer, he would just do it. And then as he went on, 30 minutes was not enough. So then every 15 minutes, he would say, Jesus, what is your will for me? And then he would try to do that. And then he worked his way down to where he was doing it every 2 minutes. In fact, he wrote a book called The Game with Minutes, where he said, you need a trick to remind yourself to think about God constantly. And when you think about God, that you know in Jesus, what you should ask is, what is your will for me? Good and gracious God who delights in me. And what he found was that this was wildly fruitful in his spiritual life. So here are some entry journals from 1930 from a 56-year-old man falling in love with Jesus all over again. To be able to look backward and say, this has been the finest year of my life, that is glorious. But, in anticipation, to be able to look ahead and say, the present year can and shall be better, that is even more glorious. If we said such things about our achievements, we'd be consummately arrogant. But if we're speaking of God's kindness and we speak truly, we are but grateful. And this is what I do to witness. See, I have done nothing but open windows in my life. God has done the rest. There have been few, if any, conspicuous achievements this year, but there has been a succession of marvelous experiences of the friendship of God. I feel as I look back over the year that it would have been impossible to have held much more in my life without breaking from sheer joy. It was in some ways the lonesomest year, and in some ways the hardest year of my life, but the most gloriously full of voices from heaven. And still it closed very beautifully. All the young men and women in my ministry were gathered for a night watch service. On New Year's Eve, we were resolving new high resolves until way past midnight. As for me, I resolved that I would succeed better this year with my experiment of filling every minute full of the thoughts of God than I succeeded last year. And I've added another resolve, to be as wide open towards people with their needs as I am towards God. The window open outward as well as upward, and especially downward, where people have the most need. January 29th, 1930. I simply feel carried along each hour doing my part in a plan which is far beyond myself. The sense of cooperation with God in the little things is what so astonishes me, for I've never felt this way in my life before. I must work very hard to be sure, but there is God working alongside me. To know this gives me a great sense of security and assurance for the future, which is also new to my life. My part is to live this hour in continuous inner conversation with God and in perfect responsiveness to His will. This makes each hour gloriously rich. It seems so far to be all I need to think about. April 18, 1930. I have tasted the thrill and fellowship of God, which has made anything discordant with God quite unappealing to me. This afternoon, the possession of God has caught me with such sheer joy that I thought that I'd never known anything like it. God was so close and amazingly lovely that I felt like melting all over with a strange blissful contentment. Having had this experience, which now comes to me several times a week, the thrill of wrongdoing repels me, for I know its power to drag me away from this God with whom I am in new love. And after an hour of close friendship with God, my soul feels clean, like new fallen snow. And everywhere, people are beautiful, or at least they have a beautiful side that I've newly discovered. On the boat from Manila last week, there was a painted woman alone. Does everybody know? where the painted woman is? Someone he surmised to be a prostitute. I spoke with her because she seemed lonely and I was praying for her. 3 of the ship's officers nearby tittered as though they thought a scandal was brewing, so I talked loudly enough for them to hear. I told her I was looking for God. As naturally as a preacher, she replied to me, "Oh, God is everywhere around us, if we only opened our eyes. You see, all the world is beautiful if we have eyes to see the beauty. For the world is packed with God's presence," she told me. "Thank you for that," I said. "I love it," with tears in my eyes. April 19th, 1930. This conscious, incessant submission to God has proven extremely difficult recently. And I have surrendered for the past few days. And today and yesterday I saw evidences of the result. In an effort to be witty, I've said biting things which have hurt the feelings of others, and have been short and impatient. I tremble, for I have told at least one of these men of this experiment, and he will think that this is the result. It is very dangerous to tell people what's going on with you, and yet I must tell them, I must share this, and I must now succeed at my experiment. The philosophy that one can begin all over again instantly at any moment is proving of great help. If this record of a soul's struggle to find God is to be complete, it must not omit the story of difficulty and of failure. One more. May 24th, 1930. A few months ago, I was trying to write a chapter on the discovering of God. Now that I have discovered him, I find that it is a continuous discovery. Every day is rich with new aspects of him and his working. As one makes new discoveries about his friends by being with them, so one discovers the individuality of God if one entertains him continuously. One thing I have seen this week is that God loves beauty. Everything he makes is lovely. You see, how do we find joy continuously? Oh, we just talk to Jesus. And if you think that that sounds silly or impossible, this person was living hand to mouth, doing very difficult work, and he found time and energy to connect with Jesus in this way. And so here is the prayer, my friends, that can lead you to joy. It is to simply pray, "Jesus, what is your will for me?" And the promise over and over again from Scripture, people who have walked this journey say it is so fruitful to simply commune with God. One last personal note here. I've never liked joy. I've never been good at joy. When Katie and I were in premarital therapy, our therapist asked, would I be willing to take an inventory for mental illness? And I scored almost 100% on depression. And I was shocked, because I like to have a fun time. But this person asked, would you be willing to consider some treatments for depression? And I said, well, I almost scored 100, I better. And so I tried therapy. I loved it. I tried some antidepressants for a long season. They were very helpful to me. They reduced my suffering. But one of the symptoms of my particular depression is called anhedonia. You don't enjoy what you're doing. You struggle with joy. And so I did not know how to bring up the joy spectrum in my life. But when I first read this book, gosh, praying that prayer, Jesus, what is your will for me? It brought so much joy into my life because more often than not, instead of saying, oh, you should drink less or fight less or call someone and confess something, those things all happened as I prayed this prayer. But sometimes Jesus will just say to me, my will for you is to not despair. You see, at Christmas time, the great gift, the great meaning of Christmas is that Jesus, as he was coming into the world, they said, he shall be named Emmanuel, God with us. And one of the great promises of the Bible is that anyone who calls upon his name will be saved. And so the path for joy, the story that we live, is to simply ask Jesus, what is your will for me? And his will for you is to have joy. That's why they said, it is good news of great joy for all peoples. So pray that prayer. Let me pray for you. Pray it for you now. Jesus, will you show us what your will is for us? Oh, God, who delights in us, who made beautiful things into the world, who speaks to us, who promised to be with us. Will you show us your will for us? God, as we pray that prayer with great trepidation, afraid that you will point out all of our flaws and all of our wrongdoings, things about which we are greatly ashamed. God, will we find you as merciful as you promised to be? Instead of saying, my will for you is to be punished or excluded, God, will we find you saying, my will for you is to be joyful and included. Oh, my beloved small ones. God, we lift up our lives to you. Would you teach us to walk the path of joy? Amen.